Pay-per-meeting models, a strategic approach to modern lead generation. Why pay-per-meeting is getting attention in 2025. Pay-per-meeting models are everywhere in B2B right now because they promise something every revenue leader wants: predictable sales conversations without committing to SDR headcount. The pitch is simple: only pay when you get a meeting, and it's naturally appealing when budgets are tight and you need pipeline fast. But like any outsourced sales lever, the model only works when you control the definition of qualified and the mechanics of how meetings get created. When pay-per-meeting lead generation is done well, it shifts delivery risk to the vendor and turns outbound into a unit economics problem you can actually manage. That's especially valuable when average B2B win rates hover around 21%, meaning you need a consistent, repeatable flow of real opportunities, not just busy calendars. The goal isn't more meetings, it's more meetings that reliably become pipeline. We see teams use pay-per-meeting as a pressure valve when internal capacity is capped, or when they're evaluating a new cold calling agency, cold calling services, or a cold email agency without signing a long retainer. The upside is speed and clarity. The downside is that misaligned incentives can produce calendar spam that erodes trust with AEs. If you treat a pay-per-meeting vendor like a true sales development agency, aligned to outcomes, not activity, you can get the best of both worlds. What pay-per-meeting actually buys you? In a pay-per-meeting engagement, you're buying a defined sales conversation, not the underlying effort. Instead of paying for dials, email volume, or hours worked, you pay a fixed amount each time the provider delivers a meeting that matches agreed criteria like ICP, role, intent, and timing. Practically, that means you're outsourcing the top-of-funnel execution you'd normally expect from an SDR agency or outbound sales agency. The commercial nuance matters. Pay-per-booked models charge when something hits the calendar, while pay-per-held models charge only when the prospect actually shows up. In most B2B sales outsourcing scenarios, pay-per-held is the version worth negotiating around because it forces basic quality control and reduces gamesmanship. A smaller slice of providers will price around opportunity creation or even revenue outcomes, which is closer to alignment, but harder to define cleanly. Market pricing tends to cluster around $300 to $600 per qualified meeting for many segments, with lower-cost programs sometimes near $150 and complex enterprise meetings reaching $800 plus. Those numbers only make sense in context of your funnel, because cheap meetings can be the most expensive pipeline you ever buy. If you're comparing cold calling companies or an outsourced sales team, the right question is whether their qualification standard matches how your AEs actually sell. The unit economics you should calculate first. Before you evaluate any sales agency, back into what a qualified meeting is worth using your own conversion rates and ACV. With win rates typically in the 20 to 30% range and a median near 21%, most organizations need a disciplined path from meeting to opportunity to revenue, not a vague top-of-funnel story. Also plan for time. An average B2B sales cycle is roughly 4 months, so you should measure meetings by downstream pipeline and forecast impact, not by weekly calendar counts. A fully loaded SDR in 2025 is often around $9,800 to $14,200 per month once you include benefits, tooling, management, and enablement. If that SDR yields 10 to 14 truly qualified, held meetings, the internal math usually lands around $821 to $1,150 per meeting, which is why pay-per-meeting can look attractive at low volumes. The catch is that pay-per-meeting often loses its edge when you need consistent scale. commonly around 18 to 24 plus quality meetings per month, because a flat rate or hybrid program can drive a lower blended cost while building compounding learnings. This is also where many teams miscalculate. They price meetings forward from what feels affordable instead of backward from revenue. If your ACV is $30K, your meeting to opportunity rate is 40%, and your opportunity win rate is 25%, then paying $500 per meeting can still produce strong ROI if, and only if, the meetings are real. In other words, the meeting fee is never the risk. The qualification standard is. How to set qualification, show rate, and handoff rules. The highest leverage work in a pay-per-meeting contract is writing down what qualified means in operational terms. Define ICP, industry, size, geo, buying roles, titles or functions, disqualifiers, and minimum context captured before the handoff. Then enforce it consistently. If you're already using list building services or B2B list building services internally, align the vendor's targeting sources and account selection rules so your outreach doesn't fragment. Next, build the engagement around show rates and outcomes, not calendar volume. Require pay per held as the default. Set an expected show rate band and define replacement rules for no-shows or clear misqualification. If the provider is running telemarketing, telesales, or B2B cold calling services, make call recording access and disposition notes part of the handoff so your team can coach messaging and spot bad patterns early. Finally, make the handoff feel like an extension of your sales development agency function, not a bolt-on. The fastest quality improvements come from a weekly feedback loop between the vendor and your AEs. What converted to opportunity, what stalled, and why. This is also where multi-channel execution matters. Cold email plus B2B cold calling plus LinkedIn outreach services typically outperforms any single channel, especially when generic hooks are replaced with relevant, role-specific triggers. If you only pay for meetings, you'll get meetings. So your definition of qualified is the real product you're buying. When pay per meeting works best and when it doesn't. Pay per meeting is most effective as a strategic pilot tool. New ICPs, new geographies, new product lines, or a fast "does anyone care" test? When you need 10 to 40 high-intent conversations quickly, metered pricing can be a clean way to buy signal without hiring, onboarding, and waiting through a full ramp period. In practice, many vendors can begin booking within a few weeks if targeting and messaging are tight. It also fits teams with clear qualification and strong follow-up muscle. If your AEs run tight discovery, confirm business pain quickly, and convert conversations into opportunities at a consistent rate, then the model can produce predictable pipeline math even with a 4-month sales cycle. This is why some opt-in networks command $500 to $1,100 plus per meeting. Their buyers show up with clearer intent, and the downstream conversion rates justify the price. Where pay-per-meeting often underperforms is when you actually need scale and compounding optimization. If your plan requires steady output month after month, a pure pay-per-meeting vendor can become expensive and may optimize for booked behavior rather than pipeline quality. That's why we generally prefer predictable, flat-rate sales outsourcing programs that operate like an outsourced SDR team, paired with performance expectations on qualified meetings and opportunity creation, rather than a pure pay us only when a meeting happens structure. Common failure modes and how to avoid them. The most common mistake is vague qualification criteria, which invites a predictable outcome. Meetings that technically pass but never convert. Fix it by requiring proof points in the meeting notes, current tools, trigger, timeline, authority, and problem statement, and auditing a sample of calls and emails each week. If a vendor refuses transparency, you're not buying performance, you're buying a black box. The second failure mode is weak no-show policy design. If the contract allows payment on booked meetings or doesn't enforce replacement rules, you'll effectively subsidize bad scheduling and poor confirmation processes. Hold the line on pay per held, set clear expectations for confirmation touches, and require the vendor to manage reschedules proactively so your AEs aren't stuck doing SDR work. The third issue is brand and deliverability damage from sloppy outbound. Cold email response rates are often around 7 to 10% on average, and top performers can reach 20% plus when ICP and personalization are right. So, spray and pray isn't just ineffective, it's risky. If you're hiring an outbound sales agency or cold call services provider, insist on messaging review, suppression rules for existing customers, and a cadence that prioritizes relevance over volume. Optimizing a pay-per-meeting engine over time. If you want pay-per-meeting to stay healthy after the initial burst, build a measurement system that mirrors your funnel. Track meeting quality scores, meeting to opportunity rate, pipeline created per meeting, and win rate by segment. Then tie vendor optimization to those metrics, not just counts. Research on outbound reply patterns suggests the best hooks can drive meeting rates 3.4 times higher than generic messaging, so continuous iteration on positioning is not optional. Operationally, treat the provider like you would a high-performing SDR agency. Enable them with clear talk tracks, objection handling, and tight targeting, then run weekly reviews. This is also where sales outsourcing becomes more than just execution. Good teams will challenge your ICP assumptions, spot emerging intent signals, and identify which vertical narratives are actually resonating. If you're running B2B cold calling, make sure the vendor's callers, or cold callers, are coached to qualify decisively rather than pitch and pray. At SalesHive, we've seen the compounding effect of tight feedback loops across a wide range of industries, and our multi-channel motion is built to make that iteration visible. Since 2016, we've booked 100,000 plus B2B sales meetings for 1,500 plus clients by combining cold calling, AI personalized email outreach, and targeted list building inside our platform. The strategic takeaway is straightforward. Whether you hire SDRs, use a pay-per-appointment lead generation vendor, or partner with a B2B sales agency, the winners are the teams that instrument the process and improve it every week. Next steps: choosing the right mix for your outbound program. Choosing pay-per-meeting versus a retainer versus hiring internally is less about ideology and more about your growth phase. If you need fast signal in a new segment, metered meetings can be a smart way to learn quickly without long-term commitments. If you need durable, repeatable pipeline, an outsourced SDR team or sales development agency model usually provides better control, better learning, and stronger long-run economics. Many mature teams land on a hybrid, a stable base program, often through sales outsourcing, with performance incentives tied to qualified, held meetings and opportunities created. That structure reduces the volume over fit incentive while still keeping everyone accountable for results. It's also easier to integrate with a broader outbound system that includes cold calling services, a cold calling team, and a cold email agency motion working together. As B2B buying continues to skew hybrid, where many buyers prefer remote interactions and are comfortable purchasing high-value solutions without in-person meetings, your ability to generate and qualify conversations efficiently becomes a core advantage. The practical next step is to document your ICP, define qualification in writing, set show rate expectations, and decide what you want to optimize for: meetings, opportunities, or revenue. Once that's clear, you can evaluate any vendor, whether it's pay-per-meeting lead generation, an SDR agency, or a full B2B sales outsourcing partner, on outcomes that actually matter.